The main thing for writers to do is just keep writing and keep believing in yourself. I think in my writers group of 8 people, only 2 of us have published novels, but all the rest of them could if they just kept writing and believed in themselves. So that's my one big tip. I think too often we listen to those voices in our head or outside of our head telling us that we can't be a writer, and you can. You just have to keep writing, be persistent.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage.
So imagine finding a box in your attic, and inside are yellow newspaper clippings, faded photographs, programs from performances your grandmother gave 100 years ago. And now imagine that you're going through a hard time and feeling like your life is falling apart. Is that box history or is it a lifeline? For Melora Fern, it was both. A recovering CPA who never imagined she'd become a writer, she wrote a beautiful book, Whistling Women and Crowing Hens, a novel about finding your voice in an era that demanded women to stay silent. So, get ready to dive into a very interesting conversation all about the book and some writing tips as well. Without further ado, Melora, welcome to the Authors on Mission podcast.
Thank you. I am absolutely delighted to be here.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation.
We're absolutely delighted to have you too. So before we talk about the book though, let's chat a little bit about you. Why do you describe yourself as a recovering CPA?
Well, I was an avid reader, but never really as a child, I didn't dream of being a writer. And so I went through life as my parents wanted me to, and I majored in accounting because that's what my dad was a professor of after he was in the Navy. And I did very well in accounting and worked as a certified public accountant for many years. And I call myself a recovering CPA because a lot of people think you can't be someone who uses their left brain and right brain. So I managed to do both.
Understood. Right. Well, that transition from going from, one type of work to the other must have been a little bit challenging. Did you find any particular hurdles to get over from going from like numbers to words, or was it
Oh,
pretty smooth?
no, it definitely, when I first started writing, my first draft was horrible. Like very characters, not a plot you wanted to follow. So after a pretty brutal writer's workshop, I went back to the drawing board and I started taking some online continuing education classes in creative writing. The place I chose was Stanford. They have a really robust creative writing continuing education program. And I just took 3 courses, but the teachers and the fellow students just made a huge difference. And I feel like I became a much better writer by listening to them and also following craft books. And then I also joined a writer's critique group, and there would not be a finished manuscript without all of those.
That's interesting. There's so many authors out there who think they can just sit down and start typing and get a book out there, but kind of have to put in that hard work of getting feedback from other people to really bring it to where it has to be to, get the positive feedback from others when they read it, in order to make sure
Right.
it could be. Tell us a little bit more about that, if you don't mind, before we dive into the book itself. Like, what was it like going through those groups and getting advice and feedback? I mean, you mentioned it was really important, but what exactly was like the most memorable part, for example?
I would say probably the my writer's critique group is just amazing. I've been with the same group since 2017, and you have to be very vulnerable. So they know a lot about me through my writing, but they might not know where I went to high school or, other personal things, but they know me so well. And they were very helpful with like writing tics where I tended to use the same phrases or words. My dialogue writing at first wasn't good. So one of them suggested write, the whole conversation and then cut it down to about a third of that to make it seem real because a lot of times I think writers tend to info dump during dialogue, let's say, and most people don't need that whole beginning when you're having a normal conversation. So I tried to pull away from that and trust that the readers are really smart and they pick up from when the conversation was going on before, like we do in normal life. So like, that's just one example, but I would say my writer's critique group really helped me polish my manuscript to make it where it was ready to shop around and everything.
Understood. Well, that's really great to hear, and I think that's something a lot of authors can, learn from. Go ahead, find a group, put the time in, and you'll never know what else you might learn. You might not know you have those writing quirks, or not know that your dialogue's not strong enough until you
Right.
put it out there.
Yeah, and I think it's also important, don't limit yourself just to your genre. Like in my writer's critique group, we have a mystery writer, a memoir writer, a like cozy romance type writers, another historical fiction, but and an essay writer. So like I think it's important to get different genres, different ages if you can, you know, maybe not the people you would always hang out with, but people that are really good writers themselves and aren't afraid to give you, helpful critique, not slash and burn critique, but I definitely needed it to be a group that was encouraging as well as very honest.
Understood. Right. Yeah. And so that's perfect. So I guess you don't have to find the right group best for you.
Right.
But yeah, perfect. So all that being said, I think it's time that we transition a little bit into the book itself. So to all the audience members out there, we're chatting about Whistling Women and Crowing Hens. So tell us a little about this. Let's see, where exactly did you come up with this idea? First off, it's a totally different time period and very,
Yeah.
detailed characters. Was there a certain spark that made you think of it?
Yes, definitely. So I found a box of mementos that my mom had kept for a long time. And I can visualize the box. It was like blue and white striped, and it was under her bed. And it was all about my grandmother, her mother, who was a musical whistler traveling with the Chautauqua circuit. And there were brochures and a scrapbook and lots of photographs and newspaper articles. And I had never heard anyone talk about this about my grandmother or, known anything about what musical whistling was and what Chautauqua was. So when I had a chance to do some research, I just became fascinated with both things. Just to give you a little bit, the musical whistling is when people whistle and they whistle like a solo, like a violin solo with a band or a small orchestra. And it's just beautiful. And it's a little surprising when you hear it like with a modern tune, but they used to do it with classic tunes and everything.
Right.
And then the Chautauqua circuits were just a huge part of the turn of the century in North America. And what it was educational for rural America. So it was like people that traveled around, and their whole purpose was to educate the people of small towns. And it it was a big part of the United States, but so much not in our textbooks and that kind of thing. So I just found both things so somewhat unknown and just so fascinating. So had to write something about it.
Yeah, well, wow. It's really cool that you're able to dive into a completely different time period like that and bring a little bit of light to that for us. Actually, you said you spent hours researching all of this. For example, even just like how the Philadelphia Broad Street train station looked like back then. So can you tell us a little bit about that research process? I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of work and some of it was barely
Yeah.
made the book.
Yeah, no, I went down, I could say fell down many research rabbit holes, but every one of them I enjoyed. But I didn't know anything much about the 1920s other than like what we see on TV or whatever with flappers. And what I found out was that a lot of the people in the 1920s weren't living in cities and they didn't experience the gin joints or the jazz bands. But they did experience a lot of the cultural, fashion, and economic changes that happened during that decade. So I spent a lot of time, well, like I would read books that were written in that time period, like, well, everyone knows The Great Gatsby, but other books like that, so I could kind of pick up on the language used and the culture. And then I did a lot of, I call it deep dive research, where you go past that first page when you do a search.
Right.
And like I found some dissertations that were about the Chautauqua circuits. I found really cool newspaper articles written from the townspeople point of view about how excited they'd been waiting all summer for this Chautauqua circuit to come and entertain them and educate them. So I tried to go, use as many different things as I could. I had my grandmother's scrapbook and I had the brochures. And she traveled with what was known as the Swarthmore Chautauqua Circuit. And I went to Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania, and the library there just had a treasure trove of boxes, literally cardboard boxes of all kinds of information about how they ran their circuit and who performed and who were the lecturers and how the train schedules work. So I got a lot of my information from there as well.
Understood. Right. So it's really cool that you were really passionate about every single thing that you learned, though. Like nothing went to waste because even if it didn't necessarily make it into the book, it was still a fact that, you now know and maybe can use in future writings or even just to talk about. So really cool.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
a lot of authors need to learn from that. You need to bring yourself into the world that you're writing about.
Right. No, I think it was very important for me to be as absolutely accurate as I could. So like the train schedule, every chapter in the book is a different town where they travel to. And I got the schedule from that Swarthmore library. So the towns were real that Chautauqua had gone to. And then once I found a town, I would try to find old maps or history about buildings so that I would name a hotel that was actually there in 1924 or have them get out of, like, even though the train station may not be there now, it was there, and have them go the right way down Main Street to get to the hotel or whatever. I just wanted to be as accurate as possible. I'm sure there'll be somebody from, Westchester, Pennsylvania or something that'll say, well, just a minute there. Because you can't ever be 100%, but I got as close to it as I could.
Right. Yeah. Well, super cool though, because I mean, if you didn't do all of that, well, you wouldn't have the very immersive book that you have now.
Right.
And it's not just immersive because of the setting or whatever it is that the characters are doing, but the characters themselves too. You have such strong bonds between the characters' friendships. I mean, Birdie and Helen, for example, is clearly have a very intimate friendship. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, first off, like how did you research what a relationship would be like back then for friends? And then also, like, how did you put that onto the paper and translate it so well?
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, I did a lot of research into the 1920s and women in particular and how they were treated and, the changes they were made because you have to kind of get yourself into that era. So it's after World War I, which was considered the Great War, and people were just still kind of in shock from all that. A lot of women during that war worked in jobs that had always been male dominated before. So they had to work in that job, and then when the men came back, they got replaced by the men. So that was a big change. And then the women's suffragette was going on. So I did a lot of research into that to try to get into the minds of what women were reading in magazines and hearing, over the newspapers news. That part I did a lot of research. And then for me, my friendships are so important. So the friendships in the novel are based on a combination of longtime friends, new friends, kind of, I wrote what I knew because I found friendships so important, especially for a group of women. When you travel together, you just get this bond that you can't get anywhere else.
Right. So it's so important and so great that you're able to integrate that into the book itself. It's not an easy feat and not an easy task. Was there any like, certain strategy you used that you found worked better than others when writing about these relationships, the character dynamics?
Well, yeah, I think I really wanted to write about the camaraderie of these five women in the versatile quintet. And when I first wrote it, the critique that I got back from my writer friends was, okay, you've got five women, but I can't tell who's who, and so has no personality. So um, they encouraged me to spend time with each one of the characters and really develop them more than just a character sheet. So one of my friends said, why don't you write the same scene from all five characters' point of view? And at first I balked because I was like, no way, that takes way too much time
That
and
would
it
take
won't
a
go
long
into the
time, yeah.
novel. Yeah. But I did it, and I'm so glad I did. I not only wrote one scene, I wrote several scenes from the five women's different point of views, and it really helped me, first of all, get their mannerisms and characteristics and voice really nailed down. And then I could write group scenes easily because you could tell the difference between the five women just by the way they talked or the way they held their head or whatever. And even though that exercise did take me a while, I feel like in the long run it made a huge difference writing further and editing and making the group scenes, really sing, or if two characters were together, it was a different dynamic than two other characters that were together because I knew each of the five women so well.
Right. I love that tip. I mean, when you first hear it, okay, that's going to take a lot of time to rewrite the same scene from five different viewpoints. But if that's what works to really get a good idea of what each character really means and their mannerisms and their beliefs, well, clearly that worked. And that's how
Yep.
you
Yeah, definitely was an exercise, and I saved it all because who knows, you never throw anything away. You just put it in your pantry, right? For later.
I like that. Yeah. Well, hey, by the way, I'm noticing you actually have a copy of the book right there behind you. I was wondering if you want to show off the cover a little bit to the
Oh
audience.
yeah, well, that's actually a little poster, but I do have the book
Oh,
right here.
okay. Well, awesome.
Yes.
I love it.
I love the cover. I feel like the artist did such a great job.
Yeah, definitely. Let us know a little bit more about that then, though. Which of the characters is that? Why exactly that framing? Um,
Okay.
yeah, let us know.
Okay, so first of all, this is my protagonist, Birdie Stoffer. The artist made her more pretty than I imagined her in my mind, but her name is Alicia. She told me, pretty sells, so let's have her be really pretty. But it was important for me to have her facing the readers because a lot of historical fictions in that genre, it's either a silhouette or the back of a woman. And this is a book about someone finding their voice, and I couldn't imagine having her silhouette at the back of her head. So it was very important for me to have her facing the reader. And then in the background is a train. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then this is a barn swallow, which is very prominent in the book, and this is a northern cardinal. So I just felt like she did a great job and lots of color. I obviously like a lot of color.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
yeah,
beautiful. I love it. I'm really glad that you're able
thank
to
you.
find an illustrator that, met your vision so well. And, and I think when people pick up this book or, they're walking past in a bookstore, it's captivating. They want to learn
Yeah,
what's going on inside.
yep, thank you.
Yeah. So all this being said, then I'm curious to know if you happen to be considering any other projects down the road, any other ideas for books brewing in your mind. What's next on the
Oh, most definitely. I haven't found another box, so that's a little bit hard. But kidding aside, I still think there's a lot to be said about the world in the 1920s. And since I have done so much research, I'd like to set my next book in the 1920s. And I've visited with a lot of book clubs, and so many people want to know. The story ends a little open-ended, because that's how I like stories to end because life is never tied up with a bow. So I've had a lot of readers ask me to write a sequel, and
Mm.
I don't really want to write a sequel so much as I want to write about another whistling thing. The only real person in this book who's named is Agnes Woodward. And she was a woman in the early 1910 to 1940s who ran a whistling school in Los Angeles. And I just find that fascinating that she did that at a time when women weren't supposed to whistle, first of all, and women weren't supposed to be trained to have a career of their own. So I want to research more about her and maybe tie in the whistling school and then have Birdie and maybe Helen make a cameo type appearance in it. That's my plan right now.
Well, hey, that would be really cool. And I think that's a beautiful way to tie it all in together without making it too in your face, very
Right, right,
perfect.
right.
Um, so yeah, if people are interested in learning more about those upcoming projects then or getting connected and, staying in the know, then where's the best place for them to head and find you?
Oh, they can follow me on Instagram. It's Melora Fern. And then I have a website that my kid helped design it and keeps it up to date. It's called melorafern.com. Because I also write weekly blogs, some about my book, some about the history of the 20s, and some just about life.
Right.
Um, but so there's all kinds of information in there and photographs and more about the book and pictures from what my grandmother's memento box, that sort of thing.
Well, perfect. I love that. So guys, we're going to put the links in the description box of this podcast today so you can click on over and get in the know and learn a little bit more. Um, As we begin to wrap up, then I just have to know if you have any other writing tips to the audience today. Maybe like what piece of advice them to carry with them as they move forward with their day.
I would say the main thing for writers to do is just keep writing and keep believing in yourself. I think in my writers group of 8 people, only 2 of us have published novels, but all the rest of them could if they just kept writing and believed in themselves. So that's my one big tip. I think too often we listen to those voices in our head or outside of our head telling us that we can't be a writer, and you can. You just have to keep writing, be persistent.
Right. Well, okay, yeah, don't give up. Believe in
Yeah,
yourself. I think that's the most, the one thing that we can do if we keep putting it off, telling ourselves it's not going to happen, well, then it's not, right? So,
right, right.
I love that. Well, beautiful. This has been a very engaging conversation. I really appreciate you sharing a bunch about your book and the research process and your characters yourself. And I think that, everyone's super inspired to check out and learn more from it. So, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. This has been so fun.
Of course. Well, guys, if you're listening today, just remember that every expert was once a beginner. Every published author once stared at a blank page too. So, you know, follow Melora's path. Give it a try. Believe in yourself because you never know what can come of it. So amazing. We've learned a ton. Um, until next time, everybody, keep writing, keep whistling, and keep pursuing your mission. We'll see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.